To dig or not to dig? That can be one of the most complicated and sensitive questions here in the Holy Land, where archaeology and history are sometimes distorted for political reasons. A digging in the contested capital of Jerusalem is not surprisingly the most contentious of all sites. Joining me here in the studio to talk about that and a lot more is Dr. David Ben Shlomo from Ariel University and Professor Yonathan Mizrachi from the Max Stern Jezreel Valley College. And joining us on Skype is another Yonathan Mizrachi from Emek Shaveh. That's an Israeli NGO that works to prevent the politicization of archaeology. And that's really what I want to begin our discussion on. This is kind of an explosive topic. But Dr. Ben Shlomo, I want to start with you. Is it possible for archaeology here in Israel not to be political?
Well, I don't think you have to be political. I mean, because if you are digging, you are dealing with research, and you can deal with any site as another. And
but that's not exactly what happens here, right?
Some people don't do that, but you don't have to. He's asking if you have to be political. You don't have to be political, I think. Because you can just deal it in a scientific manner, because you are digging a site. It doesn't matter where it's located. You are digging the same system, same method. You are publishing it in a scientific method. So I don't think you are political by doing that.
By nature.
Yeah.
Yonathan Mizrachi, I want to bring you in here from Shaveh. What is your take on this?
Well, thank you for inviting me, of course. I think when you do an archaeological work, it's always involved with politics. You deal with land, you deal with narrative, you deal with, many times you deal with population next to the place you excavate. You have to ask yourself the question like, to whom you excavate, who are the beneficiaries from the excavations? And if you look at the excavations of Israel, especially in the West Bank, they are definitely, the beneficiaries are the Israelis. It's definitely not something that coordinated or was asked by the Palestinians. The historic narrative, I think, is a major tool in this political conflict. I think both sides using the historic narrative to claim justification.
Yonathan Mizrachi, what is your opinion on this? How to keep politics out of archaeology? Is it possible?
Well, I think it's impossible by definition, because any claim for past connections with the present are always political. Now, there are two types of politics. There's the academic politics and there's the national politics. Academic politics is always there. National politics is the most sensitive issue, and that's what we're talking about. And I think we have to make a distinction between prehistory and history. Mm-hmm. When it comes to prehistory, the origin of humans, going back to the early hominids, the Australopithecines, the Homo habilis, and so on, even Neanderthal men and early modern humans, there's no politics there, because we all share that origin. The problem began with history, with writing, and it goes back to Sumer, it goes back to ancient Egypt, or going back to Central America, to the Olmec, to the Maya, to the Incas, and it's always a political thing, because when you have writing systems, people tie that with their own culture and their own story. So it's very difficult to separate the two, in my opinion.
Dr. Ben Shlomo, can you envision some major archaeological finds about the Jewish past staying under the authority, or one day being under the authority of a future Palestinian state? I mean, the argument is that if we find something that belongs to the Jewish past, it somehow gives us ownership. But you're in Ariel University, you're in the West Bank. But do you foresee, is that a possibility?
Okay, I just answered that, but first, just to continue what you say, I mean, archaeology is involved always in politics, but as an archaeologist, you don't need to involve your politics in your work. Afterwards, people can use it for this narrative or that narrative, but this doesn't have to affect your work in digging or in publishing. That's the first issue. But the other issue is it's a pure political issue. I mean, whether we want to give some important heritage sites to a Palestinian Authority and so on. This was already dealt in Oslo, and most sites actually are included in Area A's and B. And only a handful of sites were defined in Area C to preserve them, and they also eventually were supposed to move to be given to the Palestinians. So that's the official, let's say, the Israeli position, which says, okay, if there is peace, we don't care, we will give also the heritage sites. So I don't think Jerusalem might be another question, but the West Bank.
Is that a concern, damage, especially damage of sites, especially when we talk about Jerusalem, for example, the tunnels, and many arguments that the Palestinians aren't allowing Israel to really dig there because they fear it will damage their sites. We fear Israel won't find out what's underneath the Temple Mount.
Well, first of all, archaeology always causes damage. When you're doing an excavation, you have to discover layers, you have to remove layers. Eventually it's an act of damage. We all, I hope, agree about that as an archaeologist now. And then there's a question what you preserve and what you not preserve. I think that eventually the way to preserve archaeology, and I would like to continue what David said, is that you need to get kind of an understanding between the different communities or the different forces here in order to protect archaeology in a way that majority of people will be willing to decide how to protect things and how not to protect things. And I think that what was mentioned about destruction of layers, eventually if Israel could be more cooperate with the Palestinian Authority, and the Palestinian Authority will be more cooperate with the Israelis as well, obviously, together, join forces, they can definitely protect heritage if it's about Jerusalem, if it's about the West Bank, and whatsoever. But eventually, the governments are responsible together to protect and have the ability to protect archaeology. And that also means that excavation of tunnels is something that we hope will disappear from this world. Like, by the way, from the rest of the world, it's already disappearing because archaeologists all over the world don't excavate in tunnels. It's a unique tool that's used only in one place in the world, which is Jerusalem, actually.
Yonathan Mizrachi, I want to ask you one question because I've come upon my reporting here in the Middle East. I've met, for example, Palestinian leaders at the Ministry of Education, who tell me there was never a Jewish temple in Jerusalem's Old City.
Mm-hmm.
There's no proof of the first temple. In this sense, archaeology can establish some facts.
Well, I think people want a story and a narrative better than facts. So, I mean, when it comes to that, it's a problem. But I do think that, just to follow up on my previous commenters, I think that we all share the notion that professional academic archaeologists are not in the business of politics. I'm sure that David and obviously the other Yonathan are doing their best as an archaeologist. The problem really is the use of politicians and or religious leaders and any other people with agenda on that. But I do think that archaeologists should not be naive. They should be perfectly aware of that and not cooperate with that. And this is where things sometimes begin to blur.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I wish we had more time to talk about this, but we're out of time. Yonathan, thank you. David, and our second Yonathan Mizrachi there on Skype. Thank you all for joining me. We're going to take a short break now, but don't go anywhere. We've got a lot more coming up here on the Holy Land Uncovered. Stay with us.